Welcome to Derms on Drugs, a video podcast brought to you by scholars in medicine. Derms on Drugs is where cutting-edge derm meets maybe mediocre comedy. It's leaning towards not very good. I'm Matt Cyrus, and each week I'm joined by my residency buddies Laura Ferris and Tim Patton to use our 60 years of combined experience to discuss, debate, and dissect the hottest topics in dermatology. It is everything you need to know to be on the cutting edge of dermatology, and it'll be the most fun you've ever had while actually learning something useful. Now, this week, we are super excited. We've got sort of dermatitis, unspecified type direction we are going to be taking with our special guest, Dr. Amber Atwater, who is a member of the North American Contact Dermatitis Group and previously the residency director at Duke. But first, we are going to go ahead and get into our first article, and I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Ferris.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So the paper that I picked was published in Nature Scientific Reports, Targeted Dual Biologic Therapy for Erythroderma of Unknown Etiology Guided by High Parameter Peripheral Blood Immunophenotyping. So that's a lot. This is Kornman et al., but it's Shawn Kwatra's group. Okay, so, I thought this was really interesting because we all encounter these patients. They're erythrodermic. You're not sure what they have. You biopsy, you can't really tell. You try a biologic, they get better or worse. They methotrexate, cyclosporin. So for one patient, this group, they created an immunophenotyping platform. And what they did was they basically drew his blood,
I think
took
it is
peripheral
special.
blood.
I think it's special when I do a peer review to try and get a biologic approved for somebody, let alone create an immunoflow cytometry to try and figure the shit out. Man.
Exactly. So so they looked at PBMC, they compared them to erythrodermic patients who had Sézary or PRP, and a lot of science in this, but basically what they found was that he had this unique signature of making both IL-13 and IL-17. He basically had two gamma delta T cell clones that were doing this, and sequenced the genome, did whole genome sequencing, found mutations related to IL-4, 13, and 17, and also found that the abnormals and granulocytes specifically increased MRGPRX2, which will mean more to people like you who love itch and less to people like me who do not like itch that much.
Now, wait a minute,
So
Paris. Wait. I got another question here first. You use the word clone. Does that mean that this guy had like a gamma delta T cell malignancy? Or
No,
these
it didn't.
non-malignant
It's just
clones?
it's clone. So they were, restricted by the T cell. This wasn't like a malignant population. It was just an expanded population. That's the way I read it, because that was kind of my first thought too.
Okay.
So basically, if you find this person, they make too much IL-17, they make too much, IL-13, what are you going to do? You're going to treat them with two drugs, Dupixent and Cosentyx. And basically, the guy had to be on like Q2 week Dupixent and Q3 week Cosentyx, but he cleared. They got rid of this population of pathogenic T cells. And so, I thought this was interesting because this is personalized medicine to the max, right? Like you said, I feel like, wow, I did a peer-to-peer, and this reminds me of those patients who are like, I want to know the root cause. And you're like, we're not going to tell you the root cause, right?
Well, I'm going to make one up for them. It may or may not be accurate, but I'm going to make something up.
Right. But dang it, if Kwatra did not make us all look bad by actually finding the root cause for this patient and getting him on two different drugs. So it's kind of cool though, because if you look at the basic immunophenotyping, it's like draw down some cells, stimulate them, and then look at the cytokines that they're being made by flow cytometry, something that Patton doesn't know a whole lot about. But but it's something. It's a test that you could actually kind of do if you think about how we do gene profiling on things. So,
but it
really
wouldn't.
Cool.
You would have to do, because you wouldn't know that these were like, if you did just regular flow cytometry, you would get that these were gamma delta T cells, but you wouldn't know that they were like clonal, IL-13 producers or IL-17 producers or whatever. Can you
No,
tell that
they
on?
basically get all the PBMCs, they stimulated them, and then they ran them through a flow cytometer and looked at like, is there a population that's activated in making IL-17? Or yes, interferon gamma, no. IL-13, yes. So it's actually like not the most complicated to do all this, like, do you have a clonal population, blah, 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 you'd have to do that. But this is actually a way you could sort of see what's going on in the, in the peripheral blood and actually target a patient's very specific pathology.
So, Patton, so normal erythroderma patient, so meaning they didn't have preceding psoriasis, they didn't have preceding atopic dermatitis, they don't have islands of sparing or anything, the nice head to toe progression. Just consulted, you go see them. Well, 4 months ago, this rash started. Now it's horrible.
What would you do?
What do you
That's what
do?
he's trying to ask you. What would you do?
Yeah, so right. That's why this paper was a huge waste of time and money. You say that this guy is erythrodermic atopic because you can find some sponge on the biopsy. That gets him on the Dupy. And then you give him roflumilast to take care of the 17 part. There, I just saved you $7 million.
I'll bet this wasn't $7 million.
Oh, do you know how much flow cytometers costs? It is a pretty penny.
But not per use. I'm teasing him because when I came in as a first-year resident with the PhD, I said to Tim, we were reviewing a paper in Journal Club, and I said, do you even know how to do flow cytometry? And then, of course, I found out that like he spent 3 years working in this like sophisticated flow cytometry lab before medical school.
She saw this poor little DO in the derm program and thought I was an idiot. And now she knows me and she knows I'm an idiot.
An idiot who knows flow cytometry. So that's
I did flow cytometry for like 4 years. So no. I mean, this is great, right? It's just it's an amazing amount of work. But don't you think you'd have an easier time? So what would I do with an erythrodermic patient? Like methotrexate, cyclosporin, if you're going with broad anti-inflammatory treatments. I mean, I love Dupixent for so much. A lot of these biopsies are sponge derm, non-specific. If it's not, definitely PRP or psoriasis. So I think dupilumab makes a lot of sense for these people. I can't say.
But that alone didn't do it. Prednisone didn't do it. Methotrexate and Humira didn't do it. Like
no, I get all that, but like it's not unreasonable that you would say this is just really bad atopic. I'm going to throw Dupy at him.
Right. Give him a whole bunch of Rinvoq. Right. I mean, that's the
right. I would be interested to see where the JAKs are. Is there I was wondering that because they always show those pictures of the JAKs connected to these receptors and, IL-17 binds this receptor and it activates this JAK combination. Was there a perfect JAK inhibitor that would have hit your IL-13 and your IL-17 together, or just like broad JAK inhibitor?
I think like a broad JAK.
The most money talking about JAK inhibitors.
Tofacitinib. Give him tofacitinib or something.
Well, tofa's not that broad. It's actually primarily a JAK3 inhibitor. I would actually.
What am I thinking of? Ruxolitinib?
Rux is a 1-2, and Rinvoq is a 1-2. And then delgocitinib, which is the new one coming from Leo, is a 1-2-3 tick. But that's topical. Rinvoq is probably your best broad spectrum JAK.
Yeah, that would have been interesting to see.
All right, so sticking with that same theme of because we're talking about somebody who's got both IL-13 and IL-17. So we're talking about somebody who's got pathophysiologically and cytokine wise kind of both atopic dermatitis and psoriasis. And so we're next going to jump in. First, I'm going to introduce our guest for the week, who is the author of the next paper that we're talking about, and we're then going to go into the deep dive. So Dr. Amber Atwater has been a friend of mine for a long time, a fellow member of the North American Contact Dermatitis group. We've known each other for a good 10, 15 years. We were both program directors at the same time, me at Ohio State University, Amber at Duke University. She then left Duke for a little while, went to work in industry with Lilly on lebrikizumab, and now is back taking care of patients again in Northern Virginia. I had a little trouble getting permission to bring her on since she's a former Dookie, but since it's a former Dookie, it was okay. I think if she was still at Duke, I might have had some trouble getting Dr. Ferris to let her on. But Amber, great to have you here.
Thank you.
So
Good to be
let's
here.
get right into this paper. So I couldn't. So the question that I, as a contact dermatitis, atopic dermatitis, rash person, get all the time is, oh, what do you do with psoriasiform dermatitis? What do you do with psoriasiform dermatitis? And there's no articles about this. And so this study, right? So final clinical diagnosis in cases of histopathologic psoriasiform dermatitis, retrospective cross-sectional analysis of a southeastern United States population, 2004 to 2017. So a 13-year period. And I got to say, when I first saw this study, I was like, I can't believe somebody actually did this, because basically you guys took everybody who had a biopsy that showed psoriasiform dermatitis over a many-year period at Duke, and then literally somebody went through each of their charts to see what the heck happened with them and what was the eventual final diagnosis. Is that about right for what you guys did?
Yes, and the reason we did it, Matt, is because when things bother me that there's no data on them, that I can't find any information on, that's when it becomes a project, right? So this is how this became a project. It had been bothering me for about 10 years. And I finally had a fellow, Jordan Ward, who's the first author on this paper, and I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at this. And kind of the right way to analyze the data came to us, right? And so we could do it, and we did it. But it's because it bothered me, and I think that's how some of the best projects come up.
Well, one of the first questions I got to ask you, but first let's just get to the results. So the results, my main takeaway, right? So if you're out there in practice to see somebody, you're looking at it, and I don't know, I can't really tell. This doesn't look like classic anything. Let's biopsy, see what we get. Comes back psoriasiform epidermal hyperplasia with, minimal to moderate spongiosis and a perivascular lymphocytic infiltrate with a few eosinophils, psoriasiform dermatitis. And then you're still like, I don't know, okay, great, no help at all, thanks. Right. But so what eventually happened to them was about a third of them ended up having psoriasis, about a third of them ended up having dermatitis of some sort, and then about a third of them had whatever, right? Anything from lichenoid dermatitis to final diagnosis of psoriasiform dermatitis to CTCL psoriasis, whatever. And then the dermatitis patients got split into, so you guys did a nice breakout. Half of them had just, quote, chronic dermatitis, which I can't wait to talk more about what the hell chronic dermatitis means, right? And then you had, 13% of them had allergic contact dermatitis, 13% had atopic dermatitis, some had, quote, other dermatitis. So, but about, chronic dermatitis and atopic dermatitis, probably the top two. And then the body area involvement was interesting and useful as well. So, the main takeaway was if you had it on your scalp, you probably have psoriasis. If you have it on your face, you probably have dermatitis of some sort. Mm-hmm. If you've got it in your anogenital area, we're probably never going to figure out what the heck you've got. And other than that, we don't know. None of it's particularly helpful. Is that a reasonable? So a third psoriasis, a third atopic derm, third whatever. And then distribution didn't help a whole lot. Is that your takeaway?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because this analysis to kind of find if there were any locations that were associated with a diagnosis was the idea of Adam Briss. So I want to give him credit there. We were going through our 700th version of this paper, and he said, wouldn't it be cool if we did this extra analysis? And I think that's a really important part of the paper now that really makes it shine a little bit more. So I'm glad we did it.
Now, I got to ask, why isn't this in a better journal, right? So it's in the Archives of Dermatological Research. This is for
journal, Matt.
But for practicing dermatologists, this is like as uber useful as anything could ever get. If there's ever been an article that to me should have been in the, like, did you guys send it to JAD and they were just like, you guys aren't a drug company, you're not advertising, so to hell with your article. Like, what happened? Why is this not in JAD, and why is it in Archives of Dermatological Research?
Well, you know that this project was 2004 to 2017. We started the project in 2019, and honestly, it was done in 2020, 2021. And at that time, we submitted to 6 journals.
6
Wow.
All of them except for one just flat out denied it. And the one that didn't deny it tortured me with revisions and then denied it. And so we almost gave up. But interestingly, the paper was a little different then. There's a lot more data, and I had analyzed it a little bit differently. And honestly, I learned when I was working with pharma how to write a succinct paper that people care about. And I changed my paper. Not a lot, but a little. I changed it and I shortened it and I cut out some extra data. We had a whole table on what drugs patients were taking. We took a lot out, and I took some of the feedback that we had received round 1, and I submitted it to one other journal who denied it, which was a journal that had denied it the first time. I think that might just be a vendetta against me personally, but that's a whole nother story. And then I asked one of my friends, Jonathan Silverberg is a friend of mine, and I said to him, can you please look at this paper because I cannot get it published, and I don't know why. So he read it, and he's like, the paper's fine. Submit it to one of these 2 journals. And I did, and I got accepted. So like there's a whole storyline there, right? Like getting advice from others, making revisions when you need, there's so much to it. But it was hilarious when Matt emailed me a couple weeks ago and was like, what's the deal with this paper? And I'm like, this is the paper I could never get published, right?
Because it is just so it is the most common question I get is, what do you do with psoriasiform dermatitis? And there's nothing about it in the literature. Nothing. So, all right, I've been kind of monopolizing, which I usually do, and so I'm gonna see Patton. What do you got?
I had a question, not specifically about this the journal article, but you and Matt, you've published a lot on patch testing. So I did patch testing for like a second, and one of the things that I just felt that people did, other dermatologists, was they get a patient with dermatitis and they're just like, you might be allergic to something. We'll do a biopsy. There's some spongiosis with EOs, and that's got to be an allergy. And so all these people getting sent to me, and it's like you go through their history and they have a family history of asthma and things like that. They weren't counseled at all on, maybe trying sensitive things like that. Don't you think that patch testing is like way overdone? Like there are things that can be done before those patients are even referred to you. That's just not done. Or do you think the referrals are appropriate for the most part?
Honestly, I think referrals are usually appropriate. I mean, in my experience. So I was at a large academic center where I had everything basically in the state sent to me, right? Except sometimes they got sent to UNC, but usually to me at Duke, Laura.
Those people still have their rashes. Their Psoriasis needs another year to get them all cleaned up.
But now I'm in a private practice in Northern Virginia, and I'm getting referrals, and it's still kind of appropriate. Now, there are many situations where people have been patch tested and they're actually not counseled to avoid their allergens. And they come to me and I'm like, let's try this first. You've already been patch tested. Let's avoid your allergen. But I often think it's appropriate. And sometimes it's, wrongdiagnosis.com. And that's appropriate too, because I can actually help the patient, right? Like I can actually move them towards improving. And that's actually the only thing the patient cares about, right? Is clearing their skin. So I think they're okay.
Well, so Amber, if you were,
I have a question for both of you guys. Do you think it's just because, like, when you're a patch tester, you become like a dermatitis aficionado expert, right? Like, I'm wondering if the benefit is truly all the patch testing, or if it's more like the more thoughtful approach to that patient. Like, what do you think about that?
For sure, because not everybody has an allergy.
Right.
There's a bunch of people that either we don't test because it's not appropriate, or we do test and they don't have an allergy, or we do test and they have an allergy and they don't get better. But I personally feel it's still my responsibility to help them. And there are all sorts of tricks up my sleeve, and I'm sure up Matt's sleeve as well, that we can do to help those patients. So it's not always allergy, but there's lots of other, it's multifactorial, right? So we do all those things.
Would you really not patch test? Like, that blows me away. I mean, it's almost like these patients have been waiting and they have their stack of papers. Would you actually tell somebody, like, we're not patch testing you, like, blah, 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 whatever?
It's not the rule, it's the exception, but I've had acne sent to me for patch testing. I'm not going to patch test them.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was
clear-cut psoriasis, DH, bullous pemphigoid. I mean, all of these things have been sent to me for patch testing. And in those cases, I say, hold up, we're going to do a biopsy, or hold up, we're going to do this first. And then we don't patch test those patients.
Huh. So, Amber, the patch testing. So, well, first, let me ask a very direct, specific question. So, let's say you're a dermatologist who doesn't do patch testing. There's a 2 or 3 month wait to get into the good patch tester in town. Maybe it's a 45-minute drive, and they're going to have to take 3 days off work. Like, so it's not trivial, right, to get somebody patch tested. How would you decide? Because until 2017, like, I was still like, you just get a patch tested because you get a patch. We just need to find out. If we don't get a patch test, we don't have any good treatments. Now we've got great treatments, right? We've got Dupy and Rinvoq and Ebglis and Adbry and Sabinco and Nemo and whatever. So how do you decide who to just empirically be like, well, let's try treating you for atopic derm, and if that doesn't work, we'll send you for patch testing, versus first thing we're going to do is send you for patch testing, right? How do you, because that's a huge question.
So for me, it depends on the story and the distribution, right? So there of course are cases of contact derm that look like atopic derm, but classic atopic derm, I'm going to treat classic atopic derm first. But there's certain body parts that are supposedly more consistent with allergy, hands being one of them. I know you guys recently talked about this last week or the week before. Eyelids is another one that might be more likely allergy. So the answer is it depends, right? It depends on the story. If there's any chance that it's going to be allergy, I'll patch test. Because I do not want to put patients on a lifetime of any type of systemic medication if they don't need to be. Like, that's really important to me to not do that, not just because of money, but because of that's really annoying to have to do that as a patient.
Yeah.
I patch if they need it. That's actually, I wanted to say one thing about the paper, which I think is kind of funny. So Shawn has a 2025 version of kind of like my paper, right? My paper is like the pre-Dupy version. So my data went to December 2017. Like, Dupy wasn't even really available then. And so there's this whole other version. I feel like if we redid the analysis for 2017 and 2025, we might see something different, right? Because people are using different drugs to treat their patients. Sometimes people choose the diagnosis based on the drug.
Well, it's one of the things that I thought was interesting from your paper was that it's about 30% of people were diagnosed with dermatitis when all was said and done. About 12% of them were diagnosed with allergic contact dermatitis. So when you get based on that group, psoriasiform dermatitis strongly went against allergic contact dermatitis, right? So about 4%, which is 1 in 25, not none.
Yeah.
But it was 1 in 25 people with a biopsy that showed psoriasiform dermatitis had a positive patch test and final diagnosis of contact derm. And that's another thing I want to get into. So Peggy Wu, who's another friend of ours in the NACDG, just published an article looking at histopathologic features of ACD. And basically, so she looked at people who had a biopsy and then a patch test, what on the biopsy predicted a positive patch test. And the main takeaway was eosinophils go against allergic contact dermatitis, and spongiotic vesicles with Langerhans cells in them go for it. Now, the spongiotic vesicles with Langerhans cells are rare anyways, but so EOs went against contact derm, and that was about it. and they weren't strongly against it. So the takeaway for me was another confirming that biopsies are pretty worthless in terms of determining the cause of dermatitis and what's like, what you should do next. So for all four of us, right? So let's start, right? Because Pat and Ferris, you guys have had plenty of biopsies of, sponge derm, BOs recommend patch testing, might be a drug rash, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if the derm path at Pitt would give, recommendations or just it's dermatitis, period. What did you ever find biopsies helpful in sponge derm patients? Pat, and you go first.
Just to prove that it was sponge derm and, not psoriasis or other, saw a patient with DM recently that I thought really looked more spongiotic clinically, and it came back as a more lichenoid type of inflammation. So just to show that it's sponge, but I think that's such an odd thing when patients come in, because I've had a couple patients, honestly, in the last month. They came in with sponge derm with EOs and said, my doctor doesn't know what I'm allergic to. He thought maybe you could tell. And I'm done patch testing. So it wasn't even a patch test referral. It was just, what am I allergic to? Can you tell me this? And I'm like, why do you think, they're like, that's what my doctor said. I'm allergic to something based on my biopsy. I never did that.
No, I think that's passing the buck. I would say, I think looking at your paper, Amber, about 8% of those patients ended up having CTCL. So when do I biopsy? When I want to make sure it's not something bad, right? So particularly we can go back and forth about, does Dupy increase your risk of CTCL? But if there's a question, I think a biopsy to rule out CTCL, if that's on your differential, maybe makes sense. And I guess maybe one of the questions, and also maybe you had very thoughtful pathologists, because Rami Al-Rohil was your dermatopathologist who now works at UNC. So I do think it was partly because you had a really good, thoughtful pathologist. Yes. But yeah, so I guess one question, maybe to wrap up the paper and discussion, is there a pearl for people what? This was really more suggestive of CTCL, or if you see this, maybe a biopsy is more helpful because these are the patients, other than the typical, it's on non-sun exposed skin, things like that.
Well, Matt mentioned psoriasis scalp, atopic dermatitis face, and the association for CTCL actually was scattered generalized. So whole body, which is all the patients that used to come and do it for patch testing. But to that point, these people with whole body dermatitis for 15 years, we always should think about CTCL anyways, right? But that's the main marker for CTCL. And I also in the paper mentioned, let me get this number right. In North Carolina, I believe it is 35% Black or African American. And in our study, we had a higher percentage of patients who were Black or African American with cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. So thinking about psoriasiform derm in Black and African American patients, that might be even a stronger marker for CTCL.
Great.
Interesting.
That's
All right,
helpful.
Amber, I got one last question for you that might be a 5-minute-er. Do you believe? And I like that. I just realized I like that I'm using the term "believe in." Do you believe in the diagnosis of dermatitis unspecified? And let me further characterize that by saying, in the AAD's data derm set, that is the most common inflammatory dermatosis, is dermatitis unspecified. Literally, we diagnose that more than anything else. Do you think it's a real diagnosis?
So it's not a real diagnosis. It is a diagnosis that we are forced to choose from ICD-10, I guess it is. And many of my patients have that diagnosis. That does not mean I think that's the diagnosis. That means that's what I've chosen. It's essentially the equivalent to chronic dermatitis.
So why not? So when you look at the AAD 2014 criteria, itchy, chronic, spongiotic, spares the groin and axilla, that's atopic dermatitis if it's not contact derm, CTCL, blah, blah, blah. according to those, you can interpret those
I know.
criteria to say every single person who's ever been diagnosed with derm unspecified or chronic dermatitis has atopic dermatitis.
You read my paper, right? I said that chronic dermatitis might be this AD spectrum disorder, which is essentially AD. And so I would say that like my 2017 version of me would say unspecified dermatitis. The now corrupt pharma version of me that is I do believe in this AD spectrum disorder, right? This version of me believes that this is more leaning towards atopic dermatitis, and I'm probably more likely to call it that. Maybe not on day one, like when somebody walks in with full body dermatitis, I'm like, I don't know unspecified dermatitis, right? But when I've had time to work it up, this more chronic dermatitis picture, I am much more likely to call that atopic dermatitis at this point. Yeah.
All right, Patton, do you use dermatitis unspecified, chronic dermatitis, dermatitis NOS? Do you use any of those, or other than as a placeholder to?
Yeah, placeholder, right? Because you want to put, right, I believe in the atopic dermatitis spectrum. You want to get them on Dupy, and so you need to call them atopic dermatitis because they'll be like, you never gave them that diagnosis. So it's a placeholder.
Okay. Ferris, do you ever use it as a, because right, the patient I'm always thinking about is the 50-year-old with dermatitis on their upper back, extensor arms, anterior thighs, had it for 18 months, had nothing as a child. Their mom is still alive and nope, never had a rash as a kid. It's never been flexural. They have no atopic comorbidities, no family history. They've been patch tested. They didn't get better. Or even, they didn't even have them patch tested, but they're using, Dove sensitive skin bar and, a low allergenicity moisturizer. Do you, are you in the same bucket as the rest of us of, we should just call all these people atopic derm? Or do you think that it's a different thing?
It's a good question. I guess I like to think of it as atopic derm spectrum, knowing it's different than typical,
Yes.
early onset. I like the spectrum, and I may like it more because then it helps me treat it, but I like it. So I say, let's go with it.
Okay, fair. All right, so that is going to conclude our deep dive for the day. So now it's time for, as I've been getting feedback from my friends and colleagues all over the country, it turns out that everyone's favorite part of the show is Patton's trivia. Which he was like, I want to do trivia on the show. I was like, what is this is supposed to be smart.
I know what the people want, man. They love trivia. Trivia nights at bars. It's the thing.
Okay. All right. So Pat, we went over the rules with Dr. Atwater before we started, but just to remind our listeners, we're going to let Dr. Patton finish the question. And then once he finishes the question, we can start blurting out answers. It remains.
All right.
Ferris is undefeated so far. I have yet to win a week, but this week I'm feeling good. But
well, yeah, because the category here is allergens of the year.
Oh,
so,
jeez. All right.
All right.
I'm ready.
Okay. Whatever. In the early 1930s, several women developed significant ocular toxicity, including conjunctival edema, corneal ulceration, corneal necrosis, after using lash lure, an eyebrow and eyelash cosmetic that was promoted to give women fuller, darker lashes and eyebrows. The tragic outcomes described above occurred because of a severe allergic reaction to what allergen?
Formaldehyde.
Paraphenylene diamine.
It's paraphenylene diamine.
No!
Yeah.
Do you know why?
I thought I gave it away with the darker.
No, I thought it was the formaldehyde preservative.
No, so here.
Yeah, no, it's paraphenylene diamine. So it was one woman died. I mean, she got eyelid ulceration and she wound up with an infection and she died of sepsis. It was one of the catalysts for the passing of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in 1938 that gave the FDA the authority to regulate cosmetics. So it's pretty soon we're not going to have an FDA, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, that was kind of what, like, FDA is, do I understand this right? FDA banned paraphenylene diamine for use on the skin directly, right? You can't do that in cosmetics, or am I misunderstanding that rule?
So the reason I knew it was PPD was I've done several class action. I've been an expert witness in several class action lawsuits about using PPD for beer to dye. because, right, whenever you're dyeing your beard, you dye much more frequently, and you're putting it on your face. And it turns out your scalp is a relatively privileged site. So the stem cells in your follicles do a lot of protecting from allergic contact dermatitis. Susan Netteros taught me that. And it's why you can be allergic to the preservative in your shampoo, but you don't get a rash on your scalp. You only get a rash on your face. Well, beard dyes, the reactions that men get and the permanent scarring and the permanent dyspigmentation, and that the companies that make the beard dyes put the exact same warnings that you put on hair dye. And the argument is putting it on your face is totally different from putting it on your scalp. And that becomes part of the argument is you're not even allowed to put it on your skin, but on your, well, we're telling them to put it on their beard and the blah, blah, blah. But so I would say that's one of my takeaways of that. I was always like, when I got asked to be an expert witness for that, I was like, fuck yeah. Because I was always like, I can't believe they're allowed to sell beard dye. Like that seemed crazy to me. And yeah, so
it's a very altruistic motivation. We're really impressed.
Shut up.
That's good.
That's right. I didn't get paid except for my $8,000 hourly fee.
Let's move on here. All right, number 2, bacitracin was the allergen of the year in 2003. Bacitracin was isolated from a bacteria cultured from a compound fracture of a young girl. What was the species of bacteria that produced bacitracin in that case?
Bacteroides.
No, that's a good guess because of the name.
The girl's name, you told me this as a resident, Patton. The girl's name was Tracy.
That was her last name.
That was, and I feel like it was the name of the bacteria was like something subtilis.
That's pretty amazing, man.
It'd have to be Bacillus subtilis.
That's it.
Is that the word?
That goes to Amber. She got it.
Damn it.
Nice.
I have no idea, by the way.
It was Bacillus subtilis. The name of the young girl with the compound fracture, Margaret Tracy. She got hit by like an ice truck, and she had this compound fracture, and they debrided it. And in the lab, the bacteriologist said something's in here is like killing staph, and they isolated it, and there it was, bacitracin. It's really cute. The son was kind of bitter because bacitracin made a lot of money, and the mom never saw any of it. But he finally came around, and he told the story of how he would put the bacitracin on his daughter's scrapes and cuts and said, "This is grandma helping you out."
Aww. It's like the HeLa cell of contact dermatitis.
This is in the Allergen
It is
of
the
Year
HeLa
article?
story. Yeah,
All
exactly.
of this is in the Allergen of the Year article from bacitracin.
Say that again?
You read this in the Allergen of the Year article for bacitracin? This story?
No, I did a rabbit hole
Pat-
chasing down websites.
Patton
yeah.
spends.
I don't get out much.
He
I do
doesn't
not.
No.
Ever.
That's what I did for Valentine's Day.
When you text Patton, if you don't get a response in 8 seconds, you're like, "What? Are you okay, buddy?"
All right, third and final. We got a tie going in. This is exciting. The allergen of the year designation began in the year 2000. Of the 25 allergens of the year, how many are elements?
I thought you were going to say how many
2.
non-allergens.
No. You only get one guess here. Sorry. Come on, people.
1.
No. I could have asked it another way that might have been more obvious.
Well, nickel and cobalt are elements, right? And they have
Yes,
both been
ma'am.
allergens of the year. So it has to
Yes.
be, it's not 2, because Laura said 2.
Those
more
were
than
the
2.
2 I was thinking of.
I said 3. Is it 4?
What do you want to go with? Final answer.
Ooh, this is it a tie, or is Atwater the
Is
winner?
iron one? What are the other allergens of the year that are elements? Potassium dichromate? Chromium? 3. I still think it's 3. It's not 3.
It's 4. It's the metals. It's the metals.
What's the 4th?
Gold,
What's the fourth one?
gold.
Gold.
gold,
Wait.
nickel, cobalt, aluminum.
I'm
Aluminum.
challenging.
That's
I'm
right.
challenging. I think gold was one of the non-allergens of the year.
It was 2001. I don't think you guys got that clever yet.
No, not
2019 was your only non-allergen with the parabens.
No, there was another one.
Thimerosal.
There was?
Allergen.
Thimerosal
Okay.
was a non-allergen of the year too.
Wait, hold on. What was the allergen of the year this year? And who was the first author? This
It
is the
was
good question.
I thought it was lame. One of the recent ones was
Sulfites.
No.
Sulfites was
No,
last
this
year.
year. Who is the first author, Matt? It's me. Oh
Did they announce it?
Was it lanolin?
my God, it's me. I was the first author. PTDS, paratoluene diamine.
Yeah, that's right, PTDS. So
The
for
PTD
for our
alternative.
listeners, PTDS is paratoluene diamine sulfate. It is used in some PPD-free hair dyes, in particular Madison Reed is based sort of around PTDS. But the problem is if you're allergic to PPD, there's a 50-50 chance you either are or will become allergic to PTDS. So unless you're patch testing to PTDS, you don't want to just say switch over to Madison Reed because it's PPD free.
But my paper has a bunch of other alternatives other than Madison Reed. So go read it, everybody, right now. It just came out.
And it's in the
I'm
journal.
looking it up
And it's in the
as we
journal
speak.
Dermatitis, I would assume.
Yeah.
And again, the other thing I want to tell everybody. So Amber was the president of the American Contact Dermatitis Society. The CAMP app, they just I think they probably started that. It was like a 5-year process of redoing the CAMP app. And it is so good now. It is so, I don't know how anybody practiced contact derm prior to having CAMP. It just makes it so easy, comparatively.
Well, Amber was closest on that last question, so I'm giving it to her. So that's an Amber win for Amber. Way to go. Another loss for Matt.
Look at Ferris. Looks like she's ready to die over there. She looks so.
Well, it's as a middle-aged woman having lots of hair dye allergens. This is all bad news, and I've lost. So thanks a lot, Amber.
You're welcome.
Well,
Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Amber.
inviting me. Good to
this
see
was
everybody.
great. Amber, definitely thank you, and have a great rest of the week and good luck. And if you are a dermatologist in the Northern Virginia area, Dr. Atwater just recently kind of left industry and is now practicing again and is, I promise you, the best patch tester you will ever be able to send a patient to, hands down.
Appreciate that.
All right, so thank you everybody for joining us for this week's episode. Really appreciate it. And I hope the deep dive into psoriasiform dermatitis and dermatitis unspecified was helpful. If you've got questions, comments, ideas for topics that we should do on the show, shoot us an email at questions@dermsondrugs.com. I hope you learned a few things. I hope you laughed once or twice. And mostly, I hope you're planning to join us next week. Until then, I'm Matt Cyrus.
I'm Tim Patton.
I'm Laura Ferris, and we are Derms on Drugs.